Welcome to the Wake Up Call Live, where we have authentic, action-oriented conversations about creating truly inclusive workplaces where people feel they belong. Hi, I'm Laurie Battaglia. I'm the CEO of Aligned at Work, and each month I sit down with change makers that are navigating the difficult waters of life and work. We dive deep into what's working, what isn't, and what's next in leadership and life. It's about real people and real impact. I invite you to be part of the conversation. You can put a question or a comment in the box and we'll be happy to address it on the show. Your voice matters. I can't wait for you to meet today's guest.
And I can't wait to introduce her to you. So I'm Laurie Battaglia, the CEO of Aligned at Work in Scottsdale, Arizona. We work with organizations that want to treat people right at work. We want people to want to work at the organizations where they do. And we do that through a number of ways. But today we're here to meet someone who is a dear friend and was instrumental in the beginning days of Aligned at Work, way back in the day. So Jessi Purdy is the CEO of FIC Human Resource Partners, and FIC stands for Fostering Inclusive Cultures. I met Jessi because I'm friends with her mom and dad. Mom and I are both Reiki masters. We met way back in the day in Lancaster, Pennsylvania at a women's event. And I knew of Jessi and her brother, but I did not know her personally until around, I think it was 2017. And I was her career coach as she was looking to shift roles. So Jessi, do you want to talk a little bit about those days and take it from there and give us an introduction of yourself?
Sure, Laurie, and thanks for having me on today. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure working with you over the years. Our first interaction, you were indeed my career coach. I was getting ready to transition. I am a transgender woman, and I knew that my career was going to be changing drastically as a result. And I wasn't sure if that meant that I was going to be leaving the position that I was in or what was coming. But I wanted to get career coaching so that I could move forward with some clarity, some purpose, and some strategies. Because when you transition from someone who is perceived as being a man to being a woman, what happens is people start treating you like a woman, which is both affirming and, as we know, can be detrimental.
Yes.
And I had no idea how to navigate that change professionally or to how to navigate my career once people started treating me as I'd witnessed them treat women throughout my career. And so I was really thankful for your help in that regard. FIC Human Resource Partners honestly would not exist without your help during that period of career coaching.
Thank you. I remember you were going to go for a job, as they say.
Yes.
And then things just weren't leaning that way. And suddenly someone gave you an opportunity, and then you started working with me, and I introduced you to different people. And suddenly there was this network of women business owners supporting you as a woman business owner that just still gives me chills when I think about it. Yeah.
Absolutely. You and everyone who supported me during that time, absolutely amazing. You all not only invested me in me as a person, but also in my professional development as well. And
Yeah.
I would not be here without you and without all of their help. So yes.
Yeah, yeah. It's nice when we look around and figure that all out. It's like, wow, I didn't get here by myself. Like, it's a really good thing. So I ask you to be on today's show because I've been a firsthand witness to something that's been going on in your life for a while. And this month is Disability Pride Month. And so I was thinking, now, who could I get as a speaker who's living with that and working their way through it and figuring out how it impacts everything? And so I've gone through and witnessed, as the person on the side, watching you deal with a movement disorder that you have. So tell us a little bit about that and what has the pattern and the transition timeline been on that for you?
Well, I'm going to take us way back further than I think you realize.
Okay.
So there's a lot going on in my life in the disability space. And when we go back to my childhood, when I was in first and second grade, I had issues with my fine motor skills. And we just assumed that was, slow development, whatever. So we didn't really think too much about it, but it did make learning how to write a challenge.
Yeah.
Combine that with a learning disability. I was dyslexic, and it becomes even harder. Combine that with the fact that by the time I got into middle school, I was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder back in the 80s. I might be dating myself here. And you can see like this is an ongoing thing, and I bring these up only to give you some context that some of the challenges I'm experiencing now may have been present as early as my childhood, and we just couldn't connect those dots.
Mhm.
But where we're really talking about the parts of my disability that you have witnessed since you've known me really began to come into focus in 2014 when I was driving professionally for work as a route person, and I started having full body tremors and shakes and uncontrolled movements, and I was really, really worried.
Mhm.
I at that time was, oh, I'm going to lose this career. I've already lost one. I'm going to lose the second one.
Mhm.
And so I started, working with doctors, try and find some solutions, some understanding of what it was, and I ended up at Rush out in Chicago because I was out that way at the time. And while we couldn't zero in on a specific disorder, we did determine that I did indeed have a functional movement disorder. It is a neurological condition. There are some spinal injuries that contribute to some of the symptoms that I have, but there is a neurological component to this. And through 2015, I went through a long series of physical therapies to get things back under control. So when you and I started working together in 2017, I still had a few tics, but it wasn't overly noticeable, and I had things well in control by that point.
Mhm.
And I was able to do very well with that for a very long time. In late 2022, early 2023, I had this very significant progression, and this is where you really started to see, along with some of the others, just how bad this movement disorder could be for me.
Yeah.
Um, and around that time, we learned that I actually had multiple generations of Parkinson's on both sides of my family, something that we were not aware of up until that point as well. Uh,
Mhm.
our families didn't talk about these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Not
and it's
helpful.
not helpful, and that is a very common thing among some of the generations that have preceded
Yes.
mine, which is we didn't talk about these things. You might notice something, but you don't say anything about it.
Right.
And I've been like the polar opposite. I've been very upfront with people about the fact that I've got a movement disorder. I can remember I was going out with a friend for the first time, and we were going to go to a bar and we were going to have a couple drinks, and I was like, I just need to warn you that if you sit on my right side, you might accidentally get punched.
This is good to know.
Yeah.
Nobody
And
needs to start a bar fight, right?
right. And so we were at a bar where this person, was a regular, and he sat to my right, and I was like, honestly, if it happens, I'm sorry. I don't always have control. And up to this point, he hadn't seen how bad it could get. But we had a couple of drinks, and I went to reach for my beer, only my hand went this way.
Yeah.
Caught him right on the chin.
Ooh.
Um, needless to say, a lot of people in the bar were like, "Oh, we got a fight going," and he had to talk them down and explain. But
Yeah.
we're going off on a tangent here. The truth is that in 2022, 2023, it started to progress very rapidly, and for a period in 2023, I was in. I needed a power chair at times to get around, but I worked really hard to get myself back under control. To lean further into my physical therapies that I learned to do on my own. I tried to get help from the local neurologists, and it took quite a while before I found one that would work with me and
Mm.
actually be curious about what was going on to help me get things under control. The person was like, "Well, it's not Parkinson's. It doesn't act like Parkinson's. If it gets worse in 6 months, let me know."
Wow.
That's not helpful.
No.
Um, Meanwhile, the other part of this disability, being a neurological disability, is that my autonomic functions were starting to dysregulate, and I had the cognitive issues were beginning at that time. And there had been some early symptoms of that before, like back in 2014, when I would be driving, I would be on a road that I knew,
Mm-hmm.
could not make what I was seeing be where I was. I call
Yeah.
this placelessness. I don't know what the actual term for it is, but it feels like placelessness. I am
Mhm.
here. I know I am here. I know this space, but I can't make it be anything,
Wow.
which is very disconcerting. So the
Yeah.
cognitive challenge has started coming back in, and I have spent the last couple of years working with a neurological team to try different medications to monitor my symptoms. And I am happy to say that I am back to a point where I generally have control of my body. Now, I still
Yeah.
have to walk with a cane. I still bobble. I still have tics more often than I would like. And I still have freeze moments, but they are not nearly like they were back in 2022, 2023,
Mhm.
and into 2024 when we really started to make progress, where I started going from kind of holding where I was to improving. Um,
Okay.
so it's been a journey.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I saw you in full-blown, like, guard down, no, not a lot of control when we flew to do a client thing, and we had to explain to the client that for you, first class was a reasonable accommodation because you would never survive a 5-hour flight in coach and be able to move afterwards. And even with first class, you were, in pretty rough shape when you got off that plane and thankfully had set yourself up to be wheelchaired, from point A to point B. You
Yeah,
made it through the gig okay.
I made
Yeah.
it through the gig okay, but I did have to be very mindful of how much I did during that time,
Yes.
and that was not even at my worst. I was much improved by the time we got to that point, and I
Yeah.
hadn't needed my power chair in months. But yes, I did not actually prearrange to have a wheelchair on that flight.
Oh,
I thought that being in first class and having room to stretch and move and do the things that I need to do to keep the muscles active, engaged, and limber would be
yeah.
enough. But I realized probably an hour out from landing that I was not going to be able to physically stand on my own.
Yeah.
And the airline attendants had to help me physically get into the chair initially. Um,
Okay.
by the time we were ready to get into the car, I could move under my own power. I was just slow and ungainly.
Which was
Uh,
fine. Yeah. 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 It was, it also shows just how some kinds times the circumstances that we're in when we're sitting and we can't move and we can't do what we know our body needs to do for us. Your loss of control, we are out of control and we can't really help what the outcome is on the other end of it as well.
yeah.
Um, yeah. Would it be so? You also do something. I'm thinking about showing the clip that you sent us. Um, I'd like people to kind of witness what does it look like when somebody goes into the freeze thing. So do you want to set it up a little bit while I'm maneuvering us into the clip? And there is no sound on the clip, so we can just talk right over it. I believe we figured out.
Yes,
So as I
absolutely.
go for it, you
Um,
set it up, I'll get it up here.
so part of the way my movement disorder can present is I get muscle locks. Certain muscles will just stop responding. And this video is actually from my office before I had to give up going into it all the time. It's from our security camera. And I had originally pulled this to show my neurologist because I was struggling to be heard and
Hmm.
validated in what I was trying to describe. And in this video, you can see very early on, there was kind of a stutter before I stalled out. And,
Yep.
and you can see here as my body is rising up and down as I'm trying to make it move, as I exhaust myself and my energy flags and I try and pull it back. And I'm really stuck.
Yeah.
And you can see some of the jerky motions where even though part of my body is completely locked and not moving at all, the rest of it is just not responding. It's just
Mhm.
going everywhere and doing everything. And it goes on like this for a while. If you want to move it to about the 225, 235 mark, Lori.
Move that down there.
Oh,
Hold
no,
on.
let's go back to 210. There we go.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay.
When we
Here we
get
are.
down to this point, I've now been stuck here for about 2.5 minutes. um,
Hmm.
and I'm physically exhausted. I am
Hmm.
very conscious of the fact that there are people who can see what's going on. And I
Hmm.
am really trying to break that freeze. And what you see
There you
here
go.
is, in order for me to do that, I had to unbalance myself going backwards. so that a
Oh,
reflex would kick in and I could get loose. Even still, as you can see, I am not moving properly. I'm struggling. The people in the background are like paying attention to me, going, "What is going on?"
yeah.
It is very embarrassing to be stuck like that. And while
Yes.
I am fairly young, and
Hmm.
even though I walk with a cane, most people don't really see me as disabled in the same way that they might see someone who is in a wheelchair.
Right.
And I do have a handicap placard so that I can park in parking spaces closer to the entrance. And I don't always need it, but I never know when one of these episodes is going to hit.
Right.
And the last thing I want to do is be halfway through a parking lot when it does. And
Yeah.
now I'm stuck in between cars and people moving, and it's unsafe.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I do use those handicap spaces. And there are times where people have been like, "Do you really need it?" And I'm like, "I didn't need it today, but I needed it yesterday. I
Yeah.
might need it tomorrow." And I never know.
Hmm.
It's just one of those things, especially when I go to the grocery store. I don't even pretend I might not need it. I park
Hmm.
in that spot. I go in, I do my grocery shopping, and I am physically struggling to get the
Yes.
cart to a cart return afterwards. And then I often sit in my car for a few minutes before I have control of my muscles enough to drive on my own. And I
Hmm.
have gotten to the point where I know where my limitations are. And if I don't feel like I'm capable of driving, I simply will not. And there have been
Yeah.
times where I have asked somebody to take me to the grocery store. If I need to go to a meeting and I actually have to go into the office, I call a coworker and I'm like, "Hey, can you bring me in?
Yeah.
Can you help me get to this event?" I use Uber and Lyft more often.
Hmm.
Um, I walk to places rather than drive if I don't feel like I'm safe.
Hmm.
But I have to be mindful because if I walk 15 minutes, which would for most people be about a 10-minute walk, I can sometimes need upwards of a half an hour, 40 minutes to recover from that to actually function.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you said, you're fairly young. So, what how has it impacted your business and your ability to do the things you used to do in the business?
Well, it has definitely changed the way that I do things. So I've always been upfront with people the fact that I have a movement disorder, especially when we're in meetings, because I'm likely to bounce around a bit and look like I'm, jittery. And so people really, when you share that with them up front, they make less of a deal about it.
Yeah.
But when I have one of the muscles in my torso crank and pull me over, I can get into some really weird looking positions.
Mm.
So when I do my trainings and I'm doing them in person, I will always tell people I have a movement disorder. I am probably going to bounce around a lot. I'll try not to get in the way of the screen so that you can see it. If I contort into a weird shape, don't worry. I'm used to being a pretzel. We'll be fine. If I fall on the floor, don't get up right away. Let me get myself under control and decide whether or not I need assistance. And I'm
Okay.
very upfront about that at the beginning of a training session. I have a client that I've worked with since 2019. And as my cognitive challenges became worse during the worst of it, I was using different coping tools. I've long used note takers. I've used automatic calendars that will move things around on my calendar so that I can keep the most important things on top. I've used every um, project management tool that you can think of.
You have,
Um,
yes.
and as my cognitive challenges have shifted both for the better and for the worse, I've had to shift tools. And so I've had to be very clear with my clients. I use this tool for this reason. Um, One of the things that we don't have here today is closed captioning.
Right.
And that is something that I typically ask for. But I know with StreamYard, it's not the easiest thing to make happen. Uh,
Yeah.
so I didn't
They need
ask
to
the
get on
stuff.
that. Make
But
it easier.
but
Yes.
yes, so for this one client, I've been working with them for a long time, so I've been constantly updating them. Here's where my progressions are. Here are the challenges that I know that I'm having. I'm missing things. I know I'm missing things after the fact, but I may not know that I'm missing them during the fact. So I've had to ask this client to be very mindful and to nudge me when he thinks that I might not be doing something that I was said that I would do because I've lost it.
Got
Um,
it.
I've asked him to double check some of my more complicated work. At one point, you and I were working on a contract, and it was spread out over an extended period of time,
Right.
which was beyond our original contract term. And
Hmm.
I was struggling to go back and review all of the work that we had done, review all of the conversations we did, keep it in my head so that I could have that next meeting, which might be 3 or 4 months after the one that we had before. And
Hmm.
I eventually had to go to you and say, we can keep doing this, but we need to set a firm I'm done date, or we need to find someone that I can upload my knowledge to and take over the project. And that's ultimately the route that we went. It was a
Yes.
contract that I was really invested in.
Yeah.
I was really sorry that I couldn't bring it to completion, but at
Yeah.
the same time, this was about the client. And
Yeah.
I was having to repeat work on my side to keep up with the client because
Yep.
we were well beyond the time frame that we should have been in, and our
Right.
meeting times kept stretching further and further out as a result.
Yes. Yes. And I really admired the fact that you came forth and said, okay, here's what's going on with me, and this is what's happening. And then I could make the business decision. Well, you basically you're like, you should do this. And I did. I got somebody else to take the last part and land the plane kind of because it was just too much.
Yeah,
It was too much for everybody. And so I think I really admire the fact that you brought that to my attention and said, here's what's actually happening. And I was like, okay, then what do you want to do about it? And we made that decision. So I really appreciated you for that. And got that got that all done with somebody else. I'm noticing a comment that came through. I relate so much to what Jessica's saying in that portion of the video. I don't know anyone in my personal life that relates to my freezes this way, not to mention the recovery and decompression time. I have cerebral palsy and generalized anxiety disorder. So, and I think that's a message for the world is that there are things that we don't see that are going on for somebody. And you mentioned the handicap placard and people judging. We judge people that we think look totally able-bodied that and by the way, if I sink into ableist language, please correct me, because you've been really good at that. I think that we need to stop judging and just know that people have their reasons for parking where they park and doing what they do. And we can make it a little easier for them by at least acknowledging, start there, acknowledge that
yeah,
you can't see everything that
absolutely,
somebody's going through. Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know, the truth is that our entire world has been built to the average person.
Yes.
And if you fall to one side or the other of that average, it doesn't work for you.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so we have things like, the American Disability Act, so that we have standards. But honestly, there's this idea of universal design.
Hmm.
Design for the person with the least capability, and everybody else has access,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
shouldn't be that hard. And
Right.
I live here in Lancaster City, and I love the city. It's got a lot of historic charm and a lot of historic buildings, but that also means that everything has accessibility issues.
Yeah.
There are almost no businesses in the local area, in the city itself, that doesn't have some sort of step or door that is difficult to navigate if you've got a cane in one hand and something in another hand. Heaven forbid you have a chair. When we first moved into the office at the Southern Market, it was a refurbished building, and it was a new space as a result. And they had done a good job of trying to address accessibility needs,
Yeah.
but the automatic door opener wasn't installed yet when we first got there. And I didn't need my chair very often, so it wasn't that big of an issue. But even with that, you would have to go and push the button and then walk back around the door to get to the thing, and then you had to go through, and then the next set of doors did not have that.
Hmm. Yes. Yes. And there you were.
And there we are. And I'm like, okay, so I was able to do that, but now I've got to I got to get up and out of my chair to open the door, and I got to prop it open, and then I got to go through.
I think that a lot of people don't relate to any of that until suddenly they have like a foot wound or a bad shoulder or something happens with our bodies that we're like,
Yeah,
oh, that's why the curb cut is. I never understood why my mother would say, I can't walk on uneven ground. and then my back went out. And she had constant back problems and knee problems. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that's the thing. So I think a lot of times we have something go off with our bodies, and suddenly we're like, oh, that's why all these things are there.
Oh
And
yeah.
I certainly appreciate a good automatic door opener because I'm a small person, and frequently I'm schlepping a lot of bags with me as somebody who trains and sets up presentations. And boy, I love being able to push a button and not have to like jerk on the door. I threw my shoulder out at Vanguard, just like doing this through the door all the time.
Yeah.
And you don't realize what the repetitive stuff does to you.
And you don't realize how heavy some of those doors get.
Man,
And
yes,
that's the thing, just because a door is accessible in its breadth and its ability to open, its weight might be prohibitive for some people
yes,
with certain disabilities because, you know, I don't always have my full strength. So pushing a door that is super heavy open can be
yeah.
a challenge and it can unbalance me very quickly. If I've got to pull it, it's a little bit easier sometimes, but I also sometimes have to put my hand on it and physically walk backwards to open the door.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It's amazing the kinds of things that we have to do to make it work. You've taught me an awful lot over time about accessibility and when you started using note takers, and I wasn't using one, and now I'm addicted to my note taker, and I can't remember what the hell I said when I'm out in face to face with somebody. I'm like, no, can we just do Zoom? And I've got two sets of notes to look at afterwards, and I can make sense of them. Too much clutter in the email, but that's the only downside. So, what are you mentioned already some of the things, but anything that you want to put out there to the world that, like, hey, these things are necessary for me and they benefit everybody. The doors, the curb cuts, um, the automatic things. You also mentioned something that I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, I live close to Phoenix, which is a much younger city. So coming out of the Philadelphia area myself, one of the first big culture shifts I had to get used to was when you're in the Philadelphia, Lancaster, the original colonies, shall we say, you have all these 300-year-old buildings and you have all the crap that goes with it where it didn't have to be accessible because I guess people just died young or stayed home. I'm not sure what the deal is. But and so now I'm in a city that really, when we got out here 15 years ago, I think we were 2 years away from turning 100 as a state. So you do have some old buildings, but they've been ramped and things like that. Not that they're perfect, but it's not like Lancaster, Philadelphia, Reading, all those areas back there in Pennsylvania. Um, what what kinds of things would you like the rest of us to know would be helpful?
Well, I think some of the things, and let's start with bathrooms. All
Yes.
bathrooms, that are built now, multi-stall bathrooms have accessibility features,
Hmm.
and they
Yes.
absolutely suck.
Yes.
I
I would
have to
agree.
go a lot of times I have to go to the end to get to the accessible stall. It's the only one with handrails. Okay, great, wonderful. Why don't we have handrails in every stall? How many times is that single one the one that's full and I've got to use one of the ones that doesn't have enough room for me to get in with my accessibility aid? And I've got a flimsy wall on either side that I have to push up on, and I can hear the metal creak as it explodes
Yes.
under my pressure as I'm trying to lift myself up in this tiny space. All bathroom stalls should have accessibility features. And yeah,
Agreed.
we're going to lose a stall or two in these
Hmm.
rooms. And
Hmm.
that's not great, but at the same time it makes it easier for everybody. The other
Yes.
thing is I've got a cane. So I'm done. I've cleaned myself up. I need to get to the sink.
Yep.
I now have to put my hand, which I know is not sanitary in this moment, on my cane. Why don't we have handy wipes in there so that we can sanitize our hands before we go wash our hands?
Yeah.
Why is
Yeah.
that not a thing?
Yeah.
Why is it when I'm standing at the sink, I've got to take 3 steps to get to the hand dryer or to the paper towels?
Yes.
These are
Yeah.
simple accessibility features that everybody should really be like, why is it like that? Why
Right.
can't I have this for everyone?
Yeah. Yes.
Um, holiday decorations is another thing that gets me. How many times have you been to a place that has a handrail that has a garland on it?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Never thought
So
about that one.
I need to grab the handrail for stability, and there's spiky plant materials and little light bulbs and cords, and that's not safe.
True.
And when I first brought that up to the building that I moved my office into, when they did it for the first year, they were like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "It's a handrail. It has a function, and you've turned
Yeah.
it into a decoration that cannot be touched."
Yes.
I'm like, "What if somebody else comes up here and needs this handrail other than me? They
Right.
also can't use it."
Right.
So the next year they put it 2 rungs down on the railing so that the top rail was fine. And I was like, "See, now that's better. Now, can we do something about you running cords across the hallway?"
My God, yes. Oh my Lord.
They were using duct
They
tape. I'm
really
like, "No, you need a
yeah.
proper safety strip. They make these things. They're like $45 to get across this stretch of hallway. Go
Yes.
buy them."
Yes.
Oh my lord. I mean, people just don't think about it. I'm sorry.
They
People
don't.
don't
They
think
really
about
don't.
it.
That's why I wanted to ask you. I knew you had opinions.
Oh, I have opinions. So one of the things that was driving me nuts about my preferred grocery store was that I would go early in the morning so that I didn't have to deal with as much traffic. I was, at my strongest in the mornings because I
Mhm.
hadn't yet exhausted myself.
Yes.
And I would often get there and they would not have any manned any lanes with someone to check us out. And that left only the self checkout.
Yeah.
Okay. Physically I can kind of do that, but the shelf is low, the scan is low, the cart is tall, and I have to do a lot of twisting and
Yes.
lowering and reaching. And
Yes.
I'm already exhausted from driving, from walking around the grocery store for half an hour, from bending and lifting to get things into the cart. And now
Yep.
I've got to do all this checkout on my own. There were 4 or 5 times where I physically fell to the floor in the process of checkout because my body just gave up. It was like, "You've
Yeah.
done too much. This is more than we can take." And I actually tried to get legislation started to require that there always be a staffed checkout lane in places with self checkout for
Yes.
accessibility needs. Now, everybody should be able to have access to it, but for those of us with accessibility needs, it absolutely should be required. I was not a We were not able to get that through, but I did try. I did sit down
No.
and talk with a state representative. I did offer a framework, and
Yes.
they were working on it, but they could not get it. They could not get it across the line.
Mhm. That's, you reminded me of one that they got passed here. So I have a friend who has, 2 daughters, and the older one, I forget the name of it. Anyway, she has something that they never thought she'd be up walking, and she can now like, she's just giving me chills. She's 9 or 10 years old, and she can power her way in, but man, has that kid worked hard to get to this point. And she's doing things that they said she would never do. However, there are a number of people who have children who become adults eventually, and those kids will never be able to go to the bathroom. They will need diaper changes. They will need some way of their parent or guardian helping them to go to the toilet and then all the aftermath. And they got a thing passed about some place to change adults rather than just the little kubi that you change babies in. And I don't know all the details of that bill, but it took a lot to get it. As you know, it
Yeah,
takes a lot and a lot of people coming forward that have that issue. And it's not something that one person can do alone, that's for sure. Like it takes a village.
it does. It
Definitely.
does.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I think that the thing I really want to get across here is that when it comes to disability, we shouldn't be thinking about accessibility when people ask. We should be thinking about it up front. We
Yes.
should design our spaces, our procedures, our policies with accessibility in mind. And
Hmm.
not just for physical, disabilities, but, for cognitive disabilities, for learning differences. Um, it, I, Earlier today, I was having a conversation with a group that works. to help people with learning disabilities and cognitive disabilities find work. And I was talking with them, and I was like, "Oh yes, we would absolutely love to bring in people in like an intern position or a volunteer position to help them develop the skills that they need to go out and get a job."
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So we
Mm-hmm.
have some requirements when it comes to training. And our training platform, we have the video, we have closed captions, we have the slides are set up separately so that you can read them independently of what's on the video, and then we
Right.
have the full transcript. And I'm pretty sure that these address most of our learning needs, but I'm assuming some of your clients probably have additional learning styles that we need to compensate for. How do we make sure that they can engage with this material? And so we had a discussion, and they're like, what if our team watches the videos, makes the notes of what needs to be done and how to do things, and then we do the professional coaching like we would normally do with those as our materials, and we do the direct learning the way some of our clients need. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
that sounds like an amazing way to go forward with that.
Mm-hmm.
And so before we even got to the point of what the job was actually going to be, we had discussed how to make sure that they had the ability to engage with what they needed to do the job.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
was our first conversation was, and how do we do this? How do we make sure that they can engage? And now we talk about, what
Yeah.
things can we get them in doing, and how do we make that program work for them? And maybe we need to do more because this is really about them learning and being able to stand on their own.
Yes. And previous guests that I've had on the Wake Up Call include Inessa Powell from All Accessibility. It's it used to be recruiting, and now it's everything. Like how to get to they help people understand all the needs that you're talking about, and then how to get people to work. And I know that. Oh, and I also had Valerie Marsh on, who's in learning and development, and talks about neurodiversity and how if you design it for accessibility, for neurodiversity, you're designing it that it's better for everybody.
Oh,
And I think
absolutely.
that's the message of everybody here. So you have the ability as a business owner to work from wherever you want to work from. But many people who want corporate jobs, who want nonprofit jobs, where there's an office involved, they've got the long commute. They've got to figure out, how to get themselves ready far earlier than anybody else. It's going to take them forever. And then they've got the commute and the stress of that. And then they have to get from the parking lot in and all the things that happen. And so for many people, it wasn't just a nice to have to be able to work from home, but COVID showed that you can get the job done from home. If it's outcome based, especially, you can get the job done from someplace that you've got set up so that you just need to get from point A to point B when it's time to get started on that job and do it. What are your feelings about working from anywhere?
The interesting thing is that I have often, in my careers, I've often been able to work more asynchronously than just in an office.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes down to it, when I talk to my clients about creating their policies and how they manage things and their processes and procedures, one of the things that I tell them on the outset is when you're designing a job, and all jobs have to be designed. You can say, oh, you're going to be a receptionist. Great. What does that actually mean?
Mm-hmm.
You have to design it. You have to understand what the components are, what the tasks are. And in most cases, you don't necessarily need to have a physical presence to do the things.
Yes.
And
Mm-hmm.
so when I talk to clients that are looking to expand their hiring, the first thing I go is, what don't you need?
There you go.
Look at the things that you've got in this. What don't you need? Oh, well, there is not a single thing in this job description that requires someone to be physically present. Why are you making it a requirement for them to show up at an office every day?
Right.
Okay, you're worried about culture. I get that. You're worried about team integration. I get that too. you do know that there are ways of doing this virtually, right? There are virtual community spaces that you can create. You can add it to your website so that when they log into their employee portal, this is a little thing over here on the side. You click on this button, you go in here, and it's a lot like Slack.
Yeah. How about
Oh,
that?
but it's got this. It's also got this component where you can have these virtual, meetings. Oh, wow, that's great. It's kind of like Teams, and you can have these breakout groups where you can come in. You can have an all hands meeting. Everybody comes in. Then you break for social time for 20 minutes, and
Yes.
everybody goes into a room, and you have this virtual social hour that's
Yep.
20 minutes long, so it doesn't interfere with work. You can do that. Why aren't we doing that more?
Yeah.
So design your jobs with the understanding of strip out the things that you don't need, focus on what's important,
Mm-hmm.
build that.
Mm-hmm.
It can be done. I started working with a client in 2023. They were getting ready to, move from a volunteer organization to a staffed organization.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, we want to build our policies and we want to be able to hire people. And we know the work that you do. You're
Mm-hmm.
part of our community, and oh yes, and you actually know how to think about making things accessible. And we have some neurodivergent people on our team that we would like to hire. And I'm like, oh, we can absolutely do that. Now this is an organization that has a physical presence,
Mm-hmm.
and there is no requirement that you be in the office.
Uh-oh.
Now, we do have one staff member who is very much an in-person type person, and he's frequently there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Well, this
Yep.
is great. They still have volunteers, and there are frequently volunteers in the space to do the things the space is set up for. But their leadership team, their communications team, their finance team,
Yeah.
they're all virtual for a majority of the time
Yes.
because it allows them to work at the times that are effective for them. It works with their different neurodivergences, their different anxieties, their different physical capabilities. And
Mm-hmm.
so this team of people who would struggle in maybe to function the way the traditional mindset says you should work in an office
Yeah.
accomplish great things.
Yes.
They accomplished great things before they were staff. Now they're just
Yes.
doing so much more. And it's because we intentionally built the company with that in mind. Create a
Yes.
space where everybody can thrive and they thrive.
Yeah.
And if you're intentional about it, you can create these really holistic spaces where, you know,
Mm-hmm.
they have a policy that says, oh, sometimes we have to go and do these expos and these conventions. If you are someone who is sensitive to these spaces, you can ask for us to get you little loop things that you put in your ear that helps deaden the sounds without blocking the sound.
Oh,
You can have these accessibility things like a little squeezy toy, so that you can work out your anxiety. Those are all built into the policy from
that's
the
nice.
go. These are things.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have a personal space policy that we built for them. Actually, the first person I built it for was the first person that hired me. Um, but the personal space policy has evolved over the years, as all policies should. And it basically states that if a person is struggling or is triggered in a moment or is having anxiety reaction, that they can simply say, I need personal space and step out. The
Okay.
policy also states that if there is a specific event that continually triggers, that they should bring that to the HR team and discuss what those triggers are to see if there's a way to mitigate that so that you don't need to constantly step out for personal space.
Nice.
And
Nice.
so the entire process is designed to give that space and then bring back that ability to redesign the space to avoid the triggers. And you
Mm-hmm.
can do the same thing for disability and accessibility. You know,
Mm.
you can make things as accessible as possible, and somebody else might still need an accommodation. Okay,
Yeah.
great. It's fairly accessible. What accommodation do you need? Oh, well, we're already 90% of the way to what you need. We need to make this minor change. Let's do
Yeah.
that. And then let's change the policy so that we make that the standard in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of came back. I'll take it back to something that you originally said, where when you realized that there were generations of Parkinson's, but nobody had been talking about it. I think, here's my leadership position on this. I think that boomer generation is used to my parents didn't talk about it, their parents didn't talk about it. We think Aunt Sally might have had cancer, but I don't know, she never dealt with it, kind of things. And I think that has just sort of come through and everything, that we've not talked about these things. So the boomer generation, I'm calling out my peeps here, boomer generation, and I do believe that we've adversely affected Generation X as well. If we can put this in generational terms, we've sort of shoved things down and said, this is the way you do it. Some bought in, some are like, I don't know, but I don't have enough critical mass in my generation to make to really get it done. So whatever, I think that's my son's generation. And then I think there was this millennials began to surface things, and Gen Z is just like, okay, look, I'm not putting up with that shit.
Absolutely.
So I think there's this, like, no, it's always been there, but people were screened out. And I also get all fired up about the fact that there's so many people that are just destitute on LinkedIn saying, like, I need to go fund me. I just can't find a job. And yet there's employers saying nobody wants to work. And I'm like, whoa. We have two disparate messages there. So what is it that's keeping this person out? And I suspect, as a former corporate leader who saw it in action, that oftentimes if you don't fit a certain mold, if you can't interview a certain way, and I would say extroverts have the advantage there, if you can't do the things the way they want to see them done, then you don't get in the door. And you could easily do the work, and you could easily do that work from home. It just doesn't make sense to me.
You're absolutely right. And to be transparent, I'm a very young Gen X. I have a lot more millennial in me than people would,
you're right on the border
probably
there.
assume.
Yeah.
I'm like right on the edge, but I have a lot of millennial tendencies. And my favorite people to work with are actually Gen Z, because they're the first ones to stand up and go, hey, you know what?
Yes.
You know better. Why aren't you doing better?
Right.
Yeah.
Like, we've raised them well. I mean, I haven't. My granddaughters are Gen Z. I can't take a whole lot of credit. They would say more than, but anyway, go ahead.
But I've actually worked with some Gen Z people with different disabilities, who have said to me, hey, this is great what you're doing, but you haven't quite got there yet, right? And I'm like, okay, what did I miss?
Yeah.
Because I want to learn.
Yes.
I don't have all the answers. I have my perspective. I have my experience. And I do my best to take that and broaden that to as much as I can, but I don't know what I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And as much work as I have done, there's always more work for me to do. I am part of the disabled community, and I still don't know everything that I need to know. I still make mistakes. I still make assumptions. I still sometimes do things and say things, and they're like, hey, you're not really being kind or generous to us or yourself in this moment. And it's almost always the Gen Z ones that call me out, and I'm like, thank you.
Yeah.
I have other Gen X members who, Gen X people that I know who you do that to them, and they sound just like our strict parents. We don't talk about that. We don't do that. And hey, just get over it. We can all do this. If you work harder, you can get it done. I hate that. I grew up hearing you need to work harder, you need to stop being lazy, and I'm like,
right. Yeah.
The thing
a lot
was,
of this.
Nobody saw how much effort went into overcoming the challenges that I had.
Yes.
They just assumed that I wasn't living up to my potential. Okay, great, wonderful. I don't believe you.
And all we hear is, wah, wah, wah. Here's the other thing. I find that and then I want to read a couple of Sarah's comments because I think they are beautiful. I find that when you look at younger leaders, people under 40, I'm going to say, who start companies, and the way they operate and the way they position their company and all those kinds of things, they ain't perfect, but typically they are dispersed companies. Nobody's in an office. If there is an office space, I mean, great, but it's not used that much. And what they do is they save that office expense of all that commercial real estate to fly people to a location once or twice a year. And they might bring their leadership team together, maybe quarterly or something. But everybody gets on a plane and flies someplace. That's how they're leading. And so they have the pick of, whoever they want, wherever that person happens to be. and then they fly them in. Now, if somebody had a movement disorder or something that made it that they couldn't fly, they also have hybrid options. If you can't get there, then because some of them are out in the woods or just have the long flight that you've had to deal with, and it's just hard. So they will always have options for them. And the companies that are traditionally run by boomers are still thinking people are going to come around to their way of thinking. I'm like, it's their world now. There's more critical mass there from 40 down than there is from 40 up, 41 up. So, get with it, folks. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, absolutely. We should be listening to the younger generations in the workforce. What are their needs? What are their experiences? What are their concerns? And we also need to be listening to the people who have disabilities, who have neurodivergence. And we need to be taking what they're sharing with us seriously. And we need to build from that.
Yes.
And if we do build from that, we will create spaces that work better for everyone. And that's the thing that we need. I really want to drive home is if we think about this and we take these things seriously, everybody benefits. Everybody benefits.
That is absolutely it. Yep. And so I want to read a couple comments from Sarah. Oh gosh, especially about the grocery stores and how small things drain energy. I get told often, you did this yesterday, why can't you do it today, etc. And they're seen as excuses when all these things affect my daily life. Thank you, Jessica. And then down here, there's thank you so much, Laurie, for talking about the work, commute, and remote options. Those are also things that take more energy for disabled and neurodivergent people, not to mention being disabled and neurodivergent, working in an office with a majority neurotypical workforce. I have loop earplugs and several fidget toys in my office desk. I'm also an introvert and middle Gen X. So yeah, thank you, Sarah. You're saying what a lot of people have said before, and I don't think a lot of people have heard it, or we need to expose everybody, especially leaders of organizations, to this because they have the power to make it happen. They absolutely do.
Absolutely. And I want to just take a moment and talk about invisible disability. We've kind of touched on that. Not all disabilities are going to be visible. Not all neurodivergence is going to be in your face neurodivergence.
Right.
And so many people hide the little symptoms and the little challenges and the little differences so that they can just get along. And you might be wondering why this person who seems like they should be able to do so much more only does X amount.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably because you haven't created a space for them to truly be able to come out. And you probably haven't made it easy or pleasant for them to have the conversations they need to have to talk about their disabilities or their neurodivergence or to ask for the accessibility features that they need.
Yeah.
I've had plenty of people ask me, when should I bring up my disability in the interview process? And I'm of two minds of this. And I tell them the same thing. I'm of two minds. Tell them up front. And if they balk, wasn't the place you wanted to work in the first place.
Right. Yep.
Wait till you're in and then ask for the accessibility because you need the job.
Yeah. I'm right there with you on both.
I'm in HR.
Yeah.
I want people to tell me up front, and then I want to create the space for them. But as a consultant, not all of my clients want to do that. And so a lot of times the advice I have to give is not every business is going to be open to you needing accessibility accommodations if you tell them up front.
Right.
If you wait till you've got the position, you at least have the legal backing to go, oh, by the way, EEOC says you have to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm right there with you.
And I hate to say that, especially as a consultant that works with businesses.
Yeah.
But if you create a system that doesn't allow for that, then they're going to have to do the end run to get into a job and then fight for the accommodations that they need. And some will probably never bring it up. And they will never live up to their full potential in your organization. And it's not their fault, it's yours.
Right. And you don't even know
Sorry if you're in HR and management, if you're an executive. If your people don't feel comfortable coming to you and asking for accommodations, it's not their fault.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you and I could go on all day.
We could.
But
We had.
yeah, I knew we would. As we come up to the top of the hour, let me just check my notes and see, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you do want to talk about?
I mean, we've talked about a lot, and I know we haven't gone into depth on a lot of things, but in an
Hmm.
hour, you can't.
Hmm.
And I think the kind of conversation that we've had that's been free flowing, that's talked about many different things. Some of it is more personal, some of it is more social, some of it is more employment and business related. I think gives a wider opportunity for people to understand what it is to be disabled in our culture and in our workplaces and
Yeah.
in you know, in society in general. And I think that more general understanding is a good starting point.
Yeah.
Um, know that you don't know everything. Know that you're not going to always see somebody's disability or their needs, um, and know that you can always start looking at things now. Even if you don't think you have someone who needs an accommodation, you can start thinking about things. How many
Yes.
of us have worked in cubicles where there's 12 phones ringing and six people having a conversation and a printer going over here and a vacuum going down the hall? And,
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
how is that accessible?
Right.
Where are the accessibility challenges? Oh, cubicles often don't have room for two wheelchairs to go side by side.
Ain't that the
maybe
truth?
you maybe you don't have three people with wheelchairs in your company now, but at some point you might, and at some
Good.
point they might cross in a hallway.
Yes. I'd have to use the bathroom at the same time. No.
Or use the bathroom at the same time. Start thinking about those things now. Don't wait until you have to make an accommodation.
Yeah.
Start looking for places where you can improve now, so that in the future people don't have to ask for those accommodations.
Yeah.
Now is the time to start.
Yes. Yeah. It absolutely is. And I think it can start with small and steady changes if
Yes.
people really want to get aware of it. I think sometimes I like to say that my role in life is to loosen the jar lid. Like, I do this and I can't get the jar lid off and I hand it to Joe and he goes, boop. And I don't know that his hand strength is all that much more than mine. But I think in life, I like to expose people to things they weren't thinking about and then have them go like, I should be thinking about that. So I want to thank you for the time that you took today and you made it all the way through. Yay. Yay. Because it's later where you are than where I am. And you, my dear, are a morning person and I am a night owl. And so joke everybody. At one point, the client that Jessi and I were talking about earlier, we actually got that RFP within 24 hours of the due date. And I joke, no joke, that because I'm on the West Coast and she's on the East Coast, and because I'm a night owl and she's a morning person, there was only about 2-3 hours in the middle of the night where nobody was working on this thing, and we got it done and in, and then landed the job as a result of I want to say your hard work, because they were really looking for more of what you do than what I do, and it was just amazing. So um,
It worked out well, and that's another thing. Accessibility is work times. Not everybody is a 9 to 5er. I do
right,
better from 7 to 3, and it is 2 o'clock my time right now.
right,
And
you're about to
I
max out.
I did I did not start work at 7 o'clock today. I waited until a little after 9, trying to save some of
That's
that
what I
cognitive
figured.
power for today. I took a longer
Yeah.
lunch, and I will take a break after this before I do any more work. So my day, I've learned to protect my spoons.
Yeah.
It takes
Oh,
me 56 spoons to get through a week, and I have 48 in my drawer. I'm
okay.
always borrowing a spoon from another day.
Okay.
And so on days like today, I guard my spoons, and I'm like, we're just not going to spend these 2 spoons right now. We'll spend them later.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for that. So if people want to get a hold of you, how would you like them? And Fawn's going to put some banners up. How would you like them to get in touch with you?
They can reach out to me at Jessica Purdy at FICHRpartners.com. It is the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Okay, there we go. And then you're also on LinkedIn.
I am on LinkedIn. Pretty easy to find. There you go.
There we go. And
But
we'll be putting these in the comments as well for them. And then what else do we have, Fawn? Do we have other banners as well for resources? Oh, there we go.
Lancaster County Chooses Love. Thank you for putting that up. I am also an executive partner at Lancaster County Chooses Love. They are a queer-led organization that serves the queer community here in Lancaster County. We also have a food pantry that is open to everybody. You don't have to be a member of the LGBTQ plus community to come see us and take part in the food pantry. And it is a place where I spend a lot of my professional time at the moment because of the needs of our community. So I'm really happy to be part of them as well.
Very nice. And there's your website.
And there's my website.
FICHRPartners.com. And definitely look her up and get in touch. And with that, I think we've got, oh, there we go. Jessica James Purdy.
That's my
yes.
author page for all of my poetry.
And you write amazing poetry. I've been following that, and I have a couple of your books and just amazing stuff. And is that all of them, Fawn? Is that everything? Okay, got it. Okay, very good. So with that, I'm going to let us hang up for the day. But again, I want to thank you for everything. I want to thank you for the energy that you brought to this and the commitment and the passion, because this is something that we all need to think more about than what we do now and make things better for everybody. And with that, thank you to everyone that showed up today. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Laurie.
You're welcome.